If you followed a child from the time they arrive to the time they depart from school, where would things start getting wrong? In this video, I will show you where the real risk comes from in a school and 3 areas where schools actually miss it. So let's do something simple. Let's follow the journey of one child from the time they arrive to school to the time they depart. Let's start in the morning, not in the classroom, but at the gate when the child arrives in school, because this is the moment most schools lose control. Because at this critical moment of arrival, if it is not coordinated well, then risk has already crept in even before the first lesson. You have parents driving in, some children walking in, others being dropped by the school bus, others being dropped by Ubers, some in boda bodas, while some arriving late. And in that moment, the question is not whether the child has arrived. It's whether this particular moment is being coordinated. Key questions to ask: does every driver know where they're supposed to drop the child or even turn? Does the boda boda guy know where they're not supposed to enter? Does the child know where they're supposed to walk? Is someone directing movement, or everybody is left to do as they wish or as they see others doing? Tomorrow morning, just for 20 minutes, stand at the gate and watch, not as the owner, not as the school administrator, but just as an observer. Watch the parents bring in their children. Watch how they are coming in. Watch how they are being dropped. Is there anyone coordinating that movement? Is there anyone responsible? Not what it says in the policy, because I know you as the school owner, you have policies that say on arrival, this is what happens. But just observe and see what is happening on the ground. Then ask yourself, who is directing movement? Where is the blind spot? Who receives the child? Because when responsibility is shared, then no one is accountable. But this is not even the biggest problem. Now let's follow the child as they walk towards the class. And this next part is where things quietly go wrong. Look at how movement happens within your school between the transitions. Is there somebody who is clearly responsible? Again, not in theory, but in reality. Because sometimes, or most of the time, most schools will say we have policies that guide us. But if you stand and watch a class or a child moving from the gate to class, there are moments that risk can creep in without being noticed. Because most of the incidences don't happen in class. They happen in between when those movements are happening. Biggest risk is not here. The child is now in class, sat, listening to the teacher. In the classroom, it's usually an uncontrolled environment where everyone knows that everything is safe. But are there moments when this child will be left unsupervised? Because in those small moments, risk does not require a big moment, it just requires a small moment and something goes wrong. Now it's break time. The child has left class. This again is one of the areas where risk multiplies because the students are many, so much noise, so much running around, playful, because they're playful in nature. Just stand one day and look at them playing around, running around during break, and ask yourself, if something goes wrong, who will be the first to respond? If your answer is not clear, there is your gap. Because when everyone is watching, no one is watching. Let's talk about handovers. Maybe the child is going to a different class for a different lesson. Could be home science or music, going in a different class. How is the handover done? Is it assumed or is it silent? Let there be no silent handover because we want to avoid situations where the teacher will say, I thought you heard it. I thought you were in charge. Let them say it loud that I'm leaving, you are now in charge. Because assumption is one of the biggest risks in a school setting. Now it's evening. The child needs to go home. You may think because the school or the classes have ended, then risk has also ended. But that is not the case. The morning chaos just multiplies in the evening. There are parents who are calling, Uber drivers waiting. There's a boda boda guy who wants to pick the child as fast as possible so that he can go and do other errands. Again, here the question is not whether the child is leaving, it's whether that process of the child departing, is it controlled? Key questions to ask here: who confirms that the child is being picked by the right person? What happens when someone else comes to pick the child? What happens when the Uber or the boda boda arrives? Ask yourself, is this based on confirmation or familiarity? Because the day doesn't end because the classes or the school has ended. The day ends when the child is safely handed back to the parent or to the guardian. If you look at the day of this child, from arrival, movement, class, break, handover, and departure, there is a pattern. Small gaps, assumptions, unclear responsibility, all repeated every day. There is usually a gap between what you think is happening and what is actually happening. And that gap is where the real risk is. That gap. Tomorrow, pick one moment. Could be arrival, could be the movements, or could be departure. And watch what actually happens. Then ask yourself who, what, where. Who is actually responsible? What is actually happening? Where could something go wrong? That's where you start. Because at the end of it, this is about the safety of our children. From when they arrive in your school to when they depart from your school. You see these things every day, but sometimes you do not link them to risk until something happens. And this is just one way to look at it. Next time, we look at some of the most ignored risks in schools.